Ever wonder why some places don't just feel haunted, but feel haunted for a reason? Here's something you may not know. Washington's haunted landmarks are connected by more than just ghost stories. Starvation Heights, Northern State Hospital, and Kell's Pub all share a past soaked in tragedy. From patients left to starve, to spirits seen wandering abandoned corridors, to echoes of funeral rites held in crowded bars. Reports come in all the time, like faint sobbing at an abandoned sanitarium, hinting that these aren't just legends. I'll reveal the historical ties that might explain it all. You'll see how a doctor's deadly cure, a state hospital's abuses, and a former mortuary's legacy still echo today. If you're as fascinated by true haunted history as I am, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest. Some of these stories begin in the quietest corners, where the details of suffering still linger. Starvation Heights, the sanitarium, where patients never left. Starvation Heights sits just beyond the edge of Olalla, where the woods swallow up the last traces of the road. The battered foundation and a rusted, blackened incinerator are all that remain above ground. At first glance, there's little to suggest what happened here, but the legend persists. Visitors come searching for answers, drawn either by curiosity or something harder to name. They rarely talk about the view. What stands out is the unease that settles in long before you reach the ruins. Dr. Linda Hazard ran this sanitarium in the early 1900s, promising cures through extreme fasting. Her reputation spread far beyond the local area. Patients arrived from across the country and even overseas, desperate for healing. What they found instead was a regimen of starvation and control. Families were often kept at a distance, with communication tightly managed by Hazard herself. Many only learned the truth after it was too late. Their loved ones had died during treatment, sometimes after weeks of wasting away. The community around Olalla grew suspicious. Letters from relatives to officials demanded investigations, and neighbors reported strange happenings. Still, Hazard's authority held, bolstered by her medical license and the desperation of those who came to her. The doctor's estate expanded while her patients weakened. Over time, rumors spread that not all deaths were being properly recorded. Cemetery records list some of those who died, but there are persistent stories that others never received a burial at all. Attention soon focused on the sanitarium's incinerator. Neighbors described odd smells drifting through the night and saw faint light flickering from the site after dark. Historical records show Hazard was ultimately convicted of manslaughter, but only after multiple patient deaths. She had tried to conceal her actions by incinerating bodies on the property, erasing evidence of her methods and the suffering they caused. Today, the site is little more than a scar in the undergrowth, but the stories haven't faded. Investigators have captured faint sobbing and phantom footsteps near the incinerator's shadow, details that keep drawing them back. Some visitors report a sudden chill or the feeling of being watched, especially along the overgrown paths and behind the ruins. One group shared a photograph from a night visit. A shadowy figure appeared near the incinerator, vanishing as quickly as it was seen. What's most unsettling is how often these reports center on the same places: the incinerator, the remnants of patient quarters, the narrow trails where the forest has nearly reclaimed the land. The consistency of these accounts, year after year, suggests that the trauma of what happened here has left a permanent mark. The foundation and incinerator are all that remain, but for many who visit, the sense of presence is hard to ignore. From this isolated ruin, we move to a massive institution whose walls still hold a darker history. Northern State Mental Hospital, shadows in the halls. Northern State Mental Hospital rises from the fields near Cedro Woolley, its brick buildings and empty windows standing as reminders of another era. The grounds stretch out, dotted with rusting farm equipment and overgrown paths. As you walk toward the main entrance, the silence feels heavy, as if the place itself remembers what happened inside. The hospital opened in the early 1900s, billed as a modern solution for mental illness. Within a few years, it was overcrowded, housing nearly 2,000 patients at its peak. Most were admitted by family or the courts, hoping for care. Instead, many found themselves caught in a system that valued control over comfort. Patients spent long hours working the hospital's farms, laundries, and workshops. Labor described as therapy, but often grueling and relentless. For some, the work became another form of confinement. Treatments at Northern State reflected the harsh realities of the time. Archived state reports list deaths from natural causes, grueling labor, electroshock therapy, botched lobotomies, forced sterilizations, even suspected murders. Electroshock therapy and lobotomies were common, performed with little oversight. Forced sterilization was a state policy, justified as protecting society, but leaving patients with no say. Some died from complications. Others faded after repeated treatments. The logs from these years record patient deaths with brief notations, rarely offering explanations. Families often received only a terse telegram, with questions about what really happened left unanswered. Official numbers show hundreds of deaths, but some researchers believe the true toll is much higher. Patterns in the records, unexplained injuries, sudden disappearances, and vague cause-of-death notes suggest more happened than was ever reported. Each name in the files represents someone who arrived seeking help and too often found only suffering. The stories that circulate today echo the trauma of those years. Visitors have spotted a nurse in crisp white pushing a patient in a wheelchair across the overgrown grounds, only for both to vanish seconds later. Others describe glimpses of shadowy figures moving through empty rooms, or the sensation of being watched from darkened doorways. A former worker recalls hearing distant screams from the abandoned isolation rooms, even when no one was inside. Cold spots, sudden chills, and unexplained footsteps are reported again and again, always in the same places. Paranormal investigators still visit, recording strange voices and flickering movements on their equipment. Some refuse to return after what they've seen or heard. Each new account ties back to the same theme: the pain and fear of those who lived and died inside these walls. The sense of unrest here isn't just a story. It's something many feel as soon as they step inside. The legacy of Northern State Mental Hospital is not just in its records or ruins, but in the way its past continues to surface in the present. For some, the silence around the old wards is more unsettling than any sound. Next, we head to Seattle's most notorious pub, where funerals of the dead paved the way for modern-day hauntings. Kell's Irish Pub, Spirits Among the Living. Kell's Irish Pub sits in the heart of Seattle, occupying the Butterworth Building, a place that once served as the city's busiest mortuary. Before the bar opened its doors, this was where bodies from mining accidents, epidemics, and violent deaths were prepared for burial. The volume of loss that passed through these rooms is hard to grasp. Downstairs, beneath the pub, the basement was the site where bodies cooled and were processed, sometimes by the dozens in a single day. The weight of that history lingers, connecting today's visitors directly to the tragedies that shaped the city. Staff and patrons have long noticed that Kell's is different from other old bars. Reports of unexplained disturbances started early and have never really stopped. Staff have witnessed mirrors shatter and plaster fall with no explanation, acts of disruption that repeat one haunting after another. Glasses slide across tables without being touched. Even in a city full of aging buildings, these events happen too often and too specifically to be dismissed as just settling floors or faulty wiring. The most unsettling experiences are often auditory. Employees locking up late at night hear their names whispered from empty corners. Sometimes it's a single word, sometimes a full conversation, but always from a part of the room where no one stands. Bartenders talk about voices drifting up the stairwell after hours, or the sound of unfinished sentences echoing from the basement. The basement itself, once the center of mortuary activity, remains a focal point for these encounters. One bartender, locking up alone, heard human laughter echo from the locked basement, only for it to stop the moment he reached the stairs. Sightings are not limited to sounds and objects. The owner has described seeing a man at the end of the bar, a mixed-race man in a suit jacket, thin hands folded in front of him. The figure vanished when he looked up. Others have caught glimpses of people in the mirrors, only for the reflection to flicker and reveal nothing behind them. Regulars say their reflections sometimes lag or move out of sync, and more than one person has felt a sudden chill or the sensation of being watched from the darkest parts of the bar. Paranormal investigators have made Kell's a frequent stop, bringing cameras and audio recorders. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from locked sessions after hours. The sound of footsteps crossing empty floors, faint voices captured on tape, and unexplained cold spots that come and go. These occurrences have been documented on television and in local reports, adding to the pub's reputation as the most haunted in North America. Skeptics point to the building's age, the power of suggestion, and the psychological effect of knowing the pub's mortuary history. Still, the volume and consistency of reports, spanning decades and coming from both staff and visitors, make it difficult to dismiss the stories as simple imagination. The Butterworths' past connects directly to the tragedies seen at places like Starvation Heights, tying the pain of the past to the unexplained events of the present. These enduring echoes show why Kell's still ranks as one of North America's most haunted pubs. The line between history and haunting blurs in places like this, where memory and loss refuse to be forgotten. These haunted places across Washington remind us that tragedy doesn't always fade quietly into the past. From Dr. Hazard's incinerator to state hospital labs to an Irish pub's funeral basement, Washington's dead still speak through these landmarks. The stories, chills in empty corridors, laughter in locked basements, and whispers in the dark, often trace back to real suffering that history hasn't erased. If you've felt chills at any of these sites or know another haunted corner of your city, share your story in the comments below. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what might be lingering just beyond the veil.